Hey everybody, it's Mike. Forgive me, I just woke up. I'm drinking my breakfast, so I may have a little chocolate protein mustache here. Um, I want to respond to a comment. Now, please, everybody be aware. If you're new to the channel, you may not realize this, but this is how I run my channels. Please know that ahead of time so you can decide your interaction at whatever level you want. I love comments. I love comments and interactions because they spark me to have dialogue and go deeper into the subject, and I think it's helpful for everybody. And I treat this channel almost like a group therapy, although I'm kind of the one that's doing most of the talking here. But anyway, so if you leave a comment for the whole world to see, because everybody can see your comment, I assume that you're willing to have me discuss it. So bear in mind, be forewarned. If I think you are passive aggressive, I'm going to tell you. If I think that you're in denial, I'm going to tell you. If I think that there's some education that could help you, I'm going to tell you. And so some people are going to get their feelings hurt. But I do this for everybody because, comments represent, just, one small voice. And there's a lot of other people who feel similarly. And so I want to share my feelings if I think it's helpful. My whole point is to help the partner of the borderline heal. Not just get out of the relationship, not just get out of the toxic relationship, but to heal and have their power back. So there's a comment here which I think has a little of two things. I think that there's some unconscious denial. I think this person has a little bit of unconscious denial, and I think that there is some education that can be helpful for this person if they're willing to hear it. So I'm not going to use the person's name because they haven't, said, go ahead and use my post, and I'm also not going to use their name because there's a possibility they may not like what I have to say. So let's just get right to it here. So this person says, this person has positive things to say, is agreeing with some of the things that I said. And then this person says, I will argue, though, that we need to get away from the, quote, it's not their fault, unquote, modern way of explaining away any accountability on their side. Yes, there might have been traumas involved, but many people choose to become a good person despite or even because of their past experiences. Borderlines like the idea of not being accountable, selective memory loss, claiming that the drugs made them do it, etc., etc. They have figured out our willingness to accept their unaccountability. I don't know which. I think you just mean unaccountability. Accept their unaccountability and will act upon this. I have noticed that they can choose in certain situations which way to go. They can even willingly and consciously snap out of a full rage. For example, when someone calls what they want to appear normal and nice too. In one kind of fun moment, I asked her when in her life she decided to become a bitch. I didn't know anything about BPD at the time, and she giggled and told me about that day in a schoolyard at primary school when she decided to hurt another little boy physically who didn't give her the attention she wanted. I suspect that they suffer. Okay, then there's other stuff that doesn't really apply. There is no just a victim of circumstances in any situation where you are given a choice. I have compassion with what happened early in my ex's borderline's life. She can play the vulnerable little girl that just needed a helping hand, but I will refuse to write off all of her, I don't know what that word is, just because modern psychology is claiming it wasn't her fault. All right, so this person is revealing a lot of their judgments, which show, base assumptions. So here's the thing about assumptions. I talk about this in my channel, on my other channel. So critical thinking, I think, is really important to get through life. And what is critical thinking? Critical thinking is being able to hear what somebody else is saying and make decisions on the validity or the truth of whatever somebody is saying. And there's some rules. The first one is that you understand that you, the listener, have an emotional agenda, always. So there's nobody that never has an emotional agenda. Maybe you have not very much in one instance, but you're always going to have some kind of emotional reaction to whatever information is being brought to you. So the reason why you keep aware of that is because you choose to be aware that you may have an ability to unconsciously skew your own thinking to see or hear things according to your predetermined bias. If you have the ability to know that about yourself, then you can check yourself when something is said to you. If you can hear the emotional triggers, if you can hear where somebody's going, and you can go, oh, wow, I have a real strong emotional reaction to that. Let's put that aside and look at it more objectively. So that's the first thing. You need to know that everybody has an emotional agenda. Second thing is that so does the person talking to you. And so you want to listen. You want to listen for triggers and things in their speech that bring to your attention this person has a bias here. And then you go through a series of questions. So the first question is, when is something 100% true and when is something 100% false? This is where most people go when they have emotional agendas. This is where we see the borderline go here. It goes straight in. It's another way of just calling black and white thinking. So we want to look for either 100% this way or 100% that way. And the problem is that almost nothing is 100% black or white. So if you hear somebody talking in ways that you can hear that they're going from black and white thinking, that's a good sign that they aren't seeing things objectively, at least 100% objectively, and that they have an emotional agenda. So you be aware of that. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. They could be right, but you at least have to be aware of that and listen to how you respond. Are you wanting to jump on board with that? Are you wanting to respond negatively because you're on the other side of that 100% one way or another? So that's the first question. When is something 100% true and 100% false? Almost always it's never either of those. Second is, when is something partially true and partially false? Okay, so then you can listen and take what you like about it and go, okay, that's not entirely true, that's partially true. When is something sometimes true and sometimes false? For instance, in terms of untreated borderlines, when they're love bombing you, does it mean that they don't love you because they reject you later? No, they mean what they say in the moment. So it's sometimes true. When they're love bombing you, they love you. And when they reject you, they reject you. See what I mean? So it's not an either or. So what did I say? 100% true, false, sometimes true and sometimes false, partially true and partially false. Those are the questions you want to ask. So I can tell by the language here that this person has an emotional agenda. And I'm going to tell you straight off, again, I have a limited amount of time. It's going to feel like a judgment, but it's my opinion based on, my own self-analysis, and I've been doing this kind of stuff for a long time. This person still has some healing left to do. So right off the bat, I'm not going to say the person's name. They'll know who they are. Your username indicates to me that you might be a MGTOW. Men go their own way. That may be true, that may be false. There are other things that tell me you might be a MGTOW. When you use the word modern, so you throw in an assumptive bad word for modern way of explaining away accountability, and then you say later on something about modern psychology. Okay, so you, without saying anything, I can already tell you have a judgment against anything, quote, modern. And that, when I look at your username, tells me that you might be a MGTOW, because that's one of those, one of those red pill guys that say, don't do, the modern legal system and modern social mores and this, that, and the other thing. And women, they have a bias against women. And they immediately, they've already decided that women are inherently manipulative and deceptive, and so that skews all of their thinking. So the thing about assumptions is we completely live off of our assumptions. If I have the assumption that that if I step off a cliff, gravity will pull me to my death. That assumption will then color my decisions for whether or not I want to step off of high things. If I have the assumption that I can fly, then I'm probably going to have a short-lived experience, acting on that assumption. But the bottom line is, we take action based on our assumptions. If we make incorrect assumptions based on our emotional agendas, everything else will be built on top of that, which means all of the subsequent assumptions we make will also be inaccurate to some level. So I can already tell by this person's username and by some of these words, this person is probably a MGTOW, has probably made assumptions about modern society, and probably has judgments against women in general. Maybe not, but I'm just going off of what I see here. So now I'm already kind of looking for the skewed understanding here, which the reason why I'm pointing this out is because my experience with MGTOWs is that men go their own way. They say, I've decided to not have any women in my life, and I've decided to be a man, and I'm going to empower myself. What's really going on is, on an unconscious level, they're still deeply wounded, and they're still deeply controlled by women. So it's an extreme reaction. It's a defensive reaction to the fact that they can't have their own power or feel like they have their own power with women, which is why they say things like, women are deceptive, and women only want you for your money and your sperm and all these other things. And they blanket society. All modern society is out to hypnotize you. The legal system is 100% skewed against men. All of these generalities. And so they see everything through that filter. I don't know to what degree this individual operates that way, and I can't even say for sure if they do, but the evidence is there. So he says, I will argue, though, that we need to get away from the "it's not their fault" modern way of explaining away any accountability on their side. So I have never done that. I have always said, and I continue to say, that I do believe that borderline personality disorder is a serious mental illness. I do believe that there is a genetic factor, that there's also, and the phone agrees, there's a genetic factor, there is perhaps even a brain factor, that there's something missing in the brain as a result of either genetics and or the development that happened as a result of their trauma. I also believe that any trauma or abuse happened at such an early age that it had a monumental effect on their brain chemistry and their brain functioning, as well as their psychological and social development. And so they are not responsible for what happened to them. I do believe that there is a difference between borderlines and non-borderlines. And so, yeah, that could be easily taken out of context as saying that I say it's not their fault. What is not their fault is whatever happened and whatever genetic factors happened to create the snap, the break within them that they live with. But I also say that once they become adults, regardless of what happens in their life, they are, in fact, karmically responsible for all of their actions, even if they quote, can't help it. I do agree with you that everybody has the opportunity to make choices. The borderline and the codependent can choose at any time to decide to do whatever they can to get better. They can choose when given, when they're put in the opportunity of feeling the pain, to go, I don't like this, I want to get better, I'm going to seek out help. Do they do that very often? No. Is there a lot of forces pushing them to not do that? Yeah. But ultimately, everybody is responsible for the actions that they take. So I've never said that. So just because I am really emphasizing the fact that they have a mental illness so that the partners of borderlines will stop trying to fix what cannot be fixed. That's the whole point of that. It's not about taking away accountability on their side. So what that tells me right off the bat, and I'll tell you why codependence, and as you know, in my definition, anybody who has had a romantic relationship with a borderline for more than 48 hours is by definition a codependent, which is a serious, at the very least, emotional dysfunction. And non-codependents would not be with borderline. So if you've been with a borderline, there's something in you that was attracted to them. So you've got to take responsibility as well. You're with them, it's because there was something in you that wanted that craziness. Otherwise, you would have immediately said, there's something wrong here. I know because I've seen it since I've been in the borderline relationship. I've had at least 2 or 3 opportunities to be with women whom I have determined were, at the very least, extremely codependent, if not outright borderline, and I have said, nope, I'm not doing this. Not out of fear or anger or anything else. And I went, oh, I must be in a state of recovery, because while I can feel the attraction there and I can feel the impulse to go and fix them, I've come to realize that no, this doesn't feel good for me, and I'm not going to take any responsibility. So I am in a state of recovery from that. But I think that these kinds of beliefs are actually defense mechanisms that show that you're not healed. The need to believe that they can at any moment choose to be healthy, and they can at any moment choose to be kind and loving, and that they are consciously choosing to be evil and hurtful, what it shows is that on an unconscious level, you are still in denial that they have a disease, which means that you still really want to be with them. It means that even though you are saying, I'm not there, I'm rejecting them, and they're bad people and all that, it means that if they were to come to you and had a good enough Hoover, that you would buy into it and you would go back with them, because what you really want is you want them to turn around and love you no matter what you're saying. So that's why it's important to accept that they have a mental illness. Because if you don't, you guaranteed will find somebody who will hurt you. Because the dynamic of the borderline, which is why they're so attractive to codependence, is that the very thing that they ask for, the very thing that you think will heal them, that will make them love you, is the very thing that forces them to split on you. It's the love and the intimacy. So this tells me that you believe that they could, if they wanted to, they could turn around and love you. They're just choosing not to. And so point is, I think you're in denial, and I think you're setting yourself up eventually to get hurt again. But at the very least, even if not, you're sort of isolating the ulcer within you, the pain, the unforgiveness, the delusion that what you felt was also real. And it sort of creates like this, like this scab over a pulsating ulcer, which we call a resentment. And, I want people to be free and to be happy. I don't have any resentment. People still keep projecting onto me in their comments, that they think I'm still in love with my borderline ex. I'm not. I actually do love her a lot. And if there was something I could do to help her, I would, because I do know how much pain she's in. But I'm also in full awareness that any interaction I have would be so toxic to me and actually is harmful to her. So for both of those reasons, I will stay no contact for the rest of my life. If she gets help, and I hope she does, great. But the damage that she did to my ability to trust her, that I just don't think I could ever trust her again, which is a really unsafe place for me to be. But in terms of, do I have any resentment? No. Do I have any anger? No. Do I walk around with pain of loneliness or anything like that? No, because I know it wasn't real. So you have to sort of think it was real for you to think that they could, split on you like that. Consciously do it. Yes, there might have been traumas involved, but many people choose to become good person despite or even because of their past experiences. Then we start to go on, when is something partially true and partially false? Because that's true, but that's a blanket statement. You can't apply that. You can't say to somebody who only has one leg, You know, a lot of people learn how to run marathons. Just because you can't run a marathon doesn't mean you can't choose to. No, they can't. They only have one leg. So I don't think the borderline has the choice about what goes on inside of them. And I think they do have some choice, but I think the only real choice that they have if they're untreated is to choose to get treatment. I've seen over and over again, they say they're going to change and they mean it and they can't. Alcoholics, drug addicts, the same thing. There's something in there that's broken within them. They do have responsibility, and their responsibility is to go get help. But you're making it sound like that they could at any time. Now that there is some truth about what I've heard anyway, that some borderlines do get better on their own. I can't see how that's possible with somebody who's got full-blown hardcore borderline personality disorder, especially if it's comorbid with other things like PTSD and sexual abuse and stuff like that. I can't imagine how, but I suppose it's possible. Borderlines like the idea of not being accountable. That's a judgment. You don't know that. It sure looks like that, but that's why it's a mental illness. You're assuming they're not mentally ill. And you're also, I think, mistaking narcissistic personality disorder with borderline personality disorder. Narcissists, even though they are mentally ill also and are broken from the same cause, the way their pathology erupts is that they consciously know what they're doing. They can't control it. They don't have the ability to look at themselves, but they do consciously choose and plan out your demise. They choose to harm you. They get off on harming you. And some borderlines have some narcissistic traits or could be narcissists themselves, so that's possible. I certainly walked away feeling that way, that she got off on it. But I don't think that's the case anymore. If we're talking about a pure borderline, they don't like the idea. I don't think they like the aftermath of splitting. They go through tremendous guilt afterwards. I know mine did. Again, you're making a blanket statement to protect yourself because you want to believe that they'll eventually love you, and they're just choosing not to. So you're stuck in this place of being mad at them because they did it to you. So the ironic thing is that what you're wanting them, saying that they shouldn't be a victim, you're actually playing the victim here because you believe they did it to you. It's so much more freeing when you realize that they actually did love you. That, just because, and then you say here, trying to make the argument, you say, in one kind of fun moment, and I don't know why that was fun. That doesn't sound fun to me, but in one kind of fun moment, I asked her when in her life she decided to become a bitch. So you make the decision. That was a pretty cruel thing to say, obviously. I don't know. I wasn't there. I understand we all get our feelings hurt and whatever, but that was a pretty cruel, narcissistic thing to do, sadistic thing to do. When in your life did you decide to become a bitch, right? And so when you're in that, that was a sarcastic thing. She's in a sarcastic thing, place of mind. She's going to respond to that. It doesn't mean that she's telling the truth any more than you were really, truly honest about your pain. Instead of saying, when did you decide to become a bitch? You could have been more honest and said, your behavior is really hurtful to me and it feels really cruel and I don't think I deserve it. Because that's really what you're saying in that. But instead of that, you decided to be sarcastic and fun. I don't know if you were arguing or if it was passive aggressive. At the very least, it's passive aggressive. And it shows that you're not in your honesty at the moment. And you say, I didn't know anything about BPD at the time. And she giggled and told me about that day in the schoolyard at primary school when she decided to hurt another boy physically who didn't give her the attention that she wanted. So we've got typical borderline behavior where she feels abandoned. It's not that she said, I saw this happy little boy over there and I decided it would be really fun to just out of the blue torture him. She said, I felt rejected. And so I lashed out. She was responding to your assumption and kind of allowing you to abuse her in that moment. So you can't take that confession as meaning anything. So anyway, point is, I think that I don't think it serves you to stay angry, and I don't think it serves you to hold on to this idea that they're not sick and they can choose to be different and all of that. I think it's helpful to go deeper. I would recommend looking at yourself. This is my unsolicited advice. Looking at your codependence, because I can hear in there that you have a lot of pain and that you're not over it, that you have taken some healthy actions to get yourself away from it. I think it's healthy to realize that they are going to be harmful to you. But I think if you go deeper and accept that they have a mental illness that prevents them from being able to allow your love to penetrate and to love you back, that they can't help but reject you when they're in their mental illness. And you can keep them responsible by knowing that at any time they could choose to get better. So you can have both. This is when is something partially true and partially false. It is partially true that there's no doubt that they indulge in their reactions, and it is also true that that they have a mental illness and there are things that they don't have control over. Okay, so that's my thought about that. I've actually got to get some work done. Actually got to brush my teeth before I get on the phone and start doing my work for the day. All right, so that's it from me, guys. See you around.